Awesome. Thanks, Anne Marie. And thanks, everyone at Women of the Future for this opportunity. Good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you might be in the world. We're super excited to kick off the second day of this great event. Today, we're going to be discussing the implications of identity within the digital and virtual world. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Trista Pierce. I work at Booz Allen Hamilton as a senior digital strategist, specifically within the R&D and experimentation portion of our spatial computing team. I'm joined by two fantastic individuals, Amy and Sami. If you guys want to kick it over to you for an intro.
Sure. Yeah, I am so excited to be here. And for a second Women of the Future event with Trista, we got to be on the AI one about a month ago. Both Sami and Trista are good friends of mine, and so I think we're going to have a great time today. I'm Amy Peck. I'm the founder and CEO of EndeavorXR. We do a lot of front end strategy around immersive technology with sort of subspecialties in AI and blockchain. So very excited for this discussion today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sami Tauber. So lovely to be here with these lovely esteemed panelists. So my company's VNCCII. I've been embracing this digital avatar identity called VNCCII since 2017, which is pertinent to the topic of this panel. And I create multimedia IP content.
Amazing. Well, let's dive in. I think first we should talk about kind of sovereignty and expression. So how can users and individuals kind of balance their need for self-expression, especially keeping their authenticity while asserting sovereignty and ownership over their digital identities?
I'm happy to go. I love this question. To me, I think the key is to make sure our online identities express our authentic inner selves and not necessarily just our outer roles in the world, and to be true to the spirit of oneself without sharing private information. And this is a creative approach that I've adopted through personifying this fictional character of VNCCII, which is an interesting creative angle. But in terms of, one's online identity, there doesn't seem to be a secure option for all the information that we might want to protect. So that led me naturally, following my curiosity, to research blockchain and this concept of self-sovereign identity and ways we can protect our data online.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I think the fact that you embody VNCCII as one of your identities, I think that's going to be an interesting thing as we move forward. And Trista, you talked about sovereignty and expression. I think we will have multiple identities depending on how we want to present and what the environment happens to be within. And I think that will evolve as we start to feel the freedom of having these multiple identities. But again, the self-sovereign piece of managing and controlling our data, a lot of that is going to be up to us kind of making demands on regulators. GDPR happened because suddenly as consumers, we became, patently aware of how our data was essentially just being harvested. And so there was an outcry, and then legislation followed. And I believe that's going to be a similar path. And it's already top of mind, this level of kind of individual data privacy. And so it's going to be some work, but I think ultimately it will also be an underpinning for how we think about this parallel economy in the digital landscape as well.
Yeah, I love that point. I think transparent data policies, as well as like individuals advocating for their own rights as they are, using their freedom of expression. There's kind of a balance between understanding the trust behind the technology and the blockchain, but also feeling free and creative, like in the online space. So I think it kind of starts with digital literacy as well.
Yeah, that's very true, because I do hear people, say a lot, well, you put things on the blockchain and they're just out there forever. And there are privacy mechanisms, and I think they're conflating that with things like Bitcoin, where the transactions are very public and transparent, and you can actually follow and trace transactions by wallet address if you have access to it. And so there are ways to kind of build these private mechanisms in. And I see a future where we have kind of, our digital identity, and attached to that digital identity will be a private data set and a public data set. So the things that we want to share, for example, the beautiful work, and I highly recommend going to the VNCCII site and seeing Sami's work and music. That would be an example of a public persona, but then her, private data will remain private, and then she can allow access, gated access, and with a timestamp, right? So there's sort of a network mechanism for time to live, and we can also assign a time to live, so that we're also enabling companies and people who are handling our data, we're relieving them of the responsibility after a period of time.
I think also the concept of AI, it's very pertinent to this concept of identity as well, and will be influencing, how it tracks our data and predicts our behavior. And then connecting this with the SSI as well, and this concept of, a private personal assistant, where, it's not public, it's private, which is connected to your self-sovereign identity. So that is the benign outcome of like increasing efficiency, right? Like, I'd love this concept of it planning a travel itinerary based on your personal preferences and identity and data, but that information shouldn't be public. And that is the future that I would like to see us progress towards.
And Trista, you're doing so much work in general in the space. What are some of the things that you're seeing in terms of, how even companies can think about this? Because we're getting that question a lot now from companies, like, how do we move to these Web3 models, and what is the ramification of this transparency?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like it adds a layer of complexity within the public space. I think like the healthcare sector is a really good use case thinking about it, because you want your digital identity to go from platform to platform, but things that are so sensitive, such as personal health data, obviously is something that you would not want to be transferred across the board. So understanding first the digital literacy behind it, and educating policymakers and leadership within the public space who maybe are not leaning or as forward leaning into the innovation and technology is definitely step one. And I think, the government's doing a lot right now to do that, as well as building kind of the ecosystem and infrastructure to even think of these use cases and develop that possibility. That is going to, we have so many legacy systems that harness all of the data, and historical data, and to transfer that over into like a blockchain ecosystem is going to take a lot of infrastructure and space. Obviously, data is getting massive. So I think the foundational steps there are kind of where the public sector is starting right now.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And I've always been saying that we're going to live somewhere in Web 2.5 for a fair amount of time. And there are going to be, constructs where we actually want to have centralized and protected data stores, and then other pathways to move to these transparent models. And I think certainly one example that I'm a particular fan of is around ESG goals, and leveraging digital twin to not only measure those ESG goals, but then to be able to report on them based on regulatory requirements, and have a transparent reporting mechanism.
I'm just going to add a layer to this with the future of spatial computing and interacting in online mixed reality worlds with these identities. We've been discussing for like over a year now in the public zeitgeist this concept of like proof of humanity, especially with as you were saying, like digital twins, deep fakes, and the sense of trust, right? And that's why we need this underlying tech stack and technology like the blockchain to verify authenticity.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And it kind of, it's an extension of like KYC, for example, into the know your customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Kind of leading into the consent and ethical considerations as well. What measures, I guess, can be implemented to kind of verify that authenticity, and also for users to understand what consent they're giving as this data is getting transferred to the blockchain?
I think it's really challenging because like the classic joke is like you could put anything you like on the second page of a user agreement, and like I don't know about you, but almost nobody reads the full terms and conditions, and there's not much of a high degree of discernment, which is unfortunate. And they might often then contain the option to capture, store, and share your personal information. So even if you have like a fully detailed privacy policy that like honors all of the appropriate legislation, that agreement can include you agreeing to the information being shared. So when providing services, it's helpful if the key uses of personal data are like presented transparently front and center during the sign up process, and it's not hidden in like the second page of these long form terms and condition documents. And companies, always, they do have the option not to collect your personal data, or they should be, incentivizing opt-in or reward mechanisms for sharing your data. So maybe those are some ways to mitigate that.
Yeah, and I think as we move to more kind of personalized AI and AI assistance, that will be another way to ensure that we as individuals get the highlights, but it's the AI kind of scanning for some tricky language in terms and conditions and user and user agreements. So that we have the ability to make decisions based on the data, because we're not making the decisions. We're sort of, I always hit, just reject all. And that's sort of my go-to strategy. But that also assumes that everybody is compliant and there isn't any tricky language anywhere, and there isn't language elsewhere that we've agreed to inadvertently or that we've agreed to in the past. So it is going to be a challenge. And again, I think it's up to us to help regulators understand what some of the mechanics are from a technical level, but then us as consumers to, again, make those demands and put the work in now up front, so that we put things in place today that we won't have to unravel later.
Yeah, and I think even to pull it a little further, as like product managers are developing these kind of systems, keeping that ethical and transparent and advocacy for the literacy out there, like in the user-centered design up front. So making it more simplistic and user-friendly for people to access everything you're speaking to, Sami, as well, I think is important to think of when designing these systems.
Right. And there's, like you said, I agree with you, Trista and Amy, like there's this wider cultural paradigm shift happening, as we all know, where I call a new digital renaissance, the movement away from being the passive consumer or being, exploited with data harvesting, to becoming conscious co-creators with ownership and sovereignty over our identity, our wealth, our data.
Yeah.
So Anne-Marie has actually pulled in a question here asking if we're finding that some industries are more open to doing the planning and designing in an ethical way. And I think, yes, absolutely. But it's, these are things, again, that it's sort of like we have to enter this as a team, right? So companies have to be willing to put their customers, privacy first, whether it's B2B or B2C facing. And I think the companies that are getting ahead of the game on that and starting to build these one-to-one relationships with their customers and starting to be much more cognizant of data structures and permissions and really moving to these transparent models, I do think they're setting themselves up for this next evolution of how we do business. So I think it's not only about ethics, it's also a good business decision, because I think more and more we're going to see the next generations of consumers, demanding this type of transparency.
And I think it's not just a technology problem, or an effort in technology. It's a collective effort from those policymakers, the creatives, the technologists, everyone coming together to make sure that there's a shared vision and goal to go after this together, kind of harmoniously.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing, obviously DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, trying to act in the realm of public service, to experiment with this concept for the greater good. It's just working harmoniously with centralized structures and government for compliance.
Yeah, absolutely. And for What advantages would you say, like for people trying to get into the Web3 and decentralized blockchain solution space, for companies starting in this construct, what are the advantages that you would want to highlight?
I think decentralized solutions offer greater assurance of data integrity. It offers better security than centralized systems. In fact, the challenge of hacking blockchains to interfere with the data stored is so great that like phishing attempts and old school tools like keyloggers and fake login screens are more popular with like the black hat hackers.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think we're also just starting to learn what the kind of economic benefits might be. And again, I think we talk a lot about the creator economy. I look at it even more expansively as sort of a parallel economy, and modeling out different value constructs that we haven't quite figured out yet and touched on. But I think there's a big opportunity not to kind of create this economy of scarcity, but really, embrace this idea of an infinite digital landscape and what that can mean for economics.
Yeah, I think that there's an opportunity for many new business models to be created from this platform, like using peer-to-peer interactions or using token economies to incentivize user behavior. This is kind of a new way to enhance like the user engagement in a different business model. So I think there's a lot of room as we transition to maybe Web 2.5 and then 3, hopefully, to bring out new opportunities for innovation and business models in the future.
Yeah, an example of that in the creator dev realm is this company Crucible, and they've recently released the emergency SDK. It's for free. You can get it on the marketplace for Unreal, and that is like working with this concept of interoperability and like seamless authentication. So it's integrating Web3 blockchain tech with the creator economy and managing multiple digital identities that connects to your own sovereign data.
And portable identity. I'm actually one of their advisors, and I'm a very big fan. They've been working at this for many years, and yeah, I think it's an important step in both identity and interoperability.
Absolutely. Love all those advantages. Kind of want to think through some of the barriers to entry that are associated with getting into this technology.
Ooh, many. One, I think is you touched on it at the very beginning, Trista. It's around education. It's very easy to sort of say no, like this, we can't move to these types of transparent models. And so I think our work is in kind of helping companies, tear the Band-Aid off a little bit and prove out that these kind of transparent mechanisms and these peer-to-peer mechanisms aren't as terrifying as they seem. And I think a lot of companies as well are concerned about IP. They're concerned about just having a much more open and accessible visibility into how they do business. But the benefit of that is then, in aggregate, as more and more companies start to be much more transparent, we're going to solve some of the bigger, more pressing global issues. Like, it's almost like open sourcing this data just by virtue of the fact that we're aware and it's transparent and we can see it. We can start to tackle some of the bigger business issues, because I think there's when I talk about the parallel economy, I think that there's room for a less direct competitive business landscape, and one that really takes into consideration some of the much larger challenges, especially around ESG, and then beyond that, SDG goals, sort of the human goals that we're all trying to reach. And I believe that companies really need to take a stand and work together on that. In practicality, that becomes very difficult. So it's like, this is why we've chosen, ESG as one of the places to plug in. Digital twins, I think, is an excellent anchor point for any company, because that is a build it once and kind of deploy multiple times across multiple business units. And because of all the sensor data that inherently can be transparent, that's we have to take baby steps, right? So that's a way to sort of inch us into 2.5. And then we can start to look at, okay, where does the pure play Web3 construct make sense within the construct of your business?
I agree. And to add to that, there's a great book I'm just going to plug here, Mike Pell, Ahead of Its Time, The Age of Smart Information. And it like takes into account AI and multimodal real-time dynamic data and how do you create that sense of trust and authenticity. And so that really kind of like hones in on the fact that, this technology is important. And it is, like, as Amy said, like, and you said, Trista, like a matter of education, digital literacy, idealism versus pragmatism. The reality is, I think, in my opinion, that decentralized blockchain solutions are complicated. It can take a bit of setting up and ongoing maintenance. And if you compare this with, storing an unencrypted document, right, on a single computer that just has a single login and no two-factor authentication, the cost and complexity of decentralized computing can be prohibitive, especially for many smaller enterprises. So this said, having more accessible solutions are becoming available. It's also a battle of the hearts and the minds and not just a matter of the technological challenge.
Yeah, I love that, because I think we think a lot about, the processing capability, the data storage, the network connection, that all could be, infrastructure and technology barriers. But I love that, the heart and the minds that are the backbone to it all. Fun question. Right now, what are you the most excited about in this space?
Everything. No, I think it's we every year, everyone starts out with, these are our top 10 predictions for the year. Something that I've really been promoting with clients and even just personally is that I believe that we're entering not just a time of rapid technological growth, but a time of invention. And it speaks exactly to what Sami just said. It's really our hearts and minds. Let's take a moment and actually build towards something and not be in this reactive mode, but be in this proactive mode where we are actually defining a version of the future. And that's, for businesses, that takes the shape of what are the products and services of the future, but that has to come from a very personal and human place and exploration. And so I think, in addition to sort of a parallel economy and parallel paths for innovation, I think it's also just as much a parallel paths within business around the very straight and narrow path of optimization today and just improving their systems incrementally using technology. We already know we can do that. What we don't know how to do yet, and requires a lot of thought and effort, is how do we really fundamentally change how we do business? And that's a mindset shift. And I'm already seeing companies starting to embrace that. And it's cross-functional innovation.
Ooh, I love that, Amy. It's a mindset. So true. Literally, that was what I was thinking. So telepathic communication there. No, but it's true. What I'm most excited about, I mean, we're seeing the exponential increase in the zeitgeist right now with AI, and it's on the top of everyone's minds. And I think it was even recently, like, one of the godfathers of AI, Jeffrey Hinton, was like, it's 99 people are thinking about how to, accelerate and monetize this technology, and the one smartest person in the room is working out how to benefit humanity and maybe slow it down for the best reasons possible. And so in terms of digital identity, which is the topic of this panel, I'm excited about this concept of mindset and agency, and that relates to agency over our own data. And this is a cultural shift that will require education and digital literacy. And with that sense of agency also comes, in parallel, this concept of AI agency and AI agents, and how is that going to work with human agency and in parallel in a healthy symbiotic manner that will protect human data. And that's kind of relates to my point earlier about like a PPA, private personal assistant, relates to your sovereign private data to maximize efficiency and the potential for humanity whilst also respecting human dignity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last statistic I read was like 1.1 billion people do not have a proof of identity or a physical proof throughout the world. And I think just providing an accessible, data secure, limited fraud risk solution where you're not having a cumbersome paperwork process to own your authenticity and have all your credentials there in the digital platform is just an exciting space to be a part of right now.
Yeah, I love that. And I think also allowing more people to participate in the global economy, that will benefit all of us. And yes, there's an economic component to it, but at its core, it's about embracing a broader swath of humanity.
Absolutely. I think we have about 3 minutes left. Wanted to um, give any final thoughts. Didn't know if there was any questions in the chat at all.
Oh, I don't see any questions in the chat. Well, let's plug again. Sami and Vinci, please go to her site, and Mike Pell's book, The Age of Smart Information. Go to Crucible, check out what they're doing. There's a lot of really interesting work happening, and I think our job is to just educate ourselves as much as possible. Reach out to any of us anytime. We're all pretty accessible on LinkedIn and Twitter. And, we're happy to answer any questions and super happy to collaborate and bring your craziest ideas, because really, I think the beauty of all of this technology evolving at such a pace, if we're not fearful of it, this is a way to augment our lives in an incredibly positive way and leverage this technology to pave a path forward that's beneficial for all of us. But let's kind of divine that first, and let's divine it together. And we can get there.